Third part. Old Mrs. Sheldon's house was at the west end of the orchards. All of the evergreen grass bowed in unison with the breeze, changing the shape of the ground and hills every time they bent. The dilapidated old house with a weather vane on its red roof looked like the perfect place for a 120-year-old crone to pass her lonely later years. Mrs. Sheldon was sitting in a rocking chair on her front porch. Years must have passed since the last time anybody came to see her. Aside from the fact that her last callers had been school children, the old woman couldn't recall anything about that visit. From time to time, the face of a gray-haired old man flitted through her mind, but she didn't understand why it made her feel strangely nostalgic. The fact that he was the man whose gravestone stood on the top of the little hill out back was something she'd long since forgotten. Thanks to a cyborg conversion procedure she'd undergone more than a century earlier, all she needed now was to have her nutrient-enriched blood changed once every 30 years. Perhaps that was the reason people from town rarely called on her. That morning, as the old woman rocked back and forth for the 2,000th some odd time, she saw someone for the first time in who know how many days. Dismounting, Dee headed over to the old woman sitting in her antiquated but sturdy-looking rocking chair. "Mrs. Sheldon?" he asked.
"That's me. And who are you?"
The woman replied without a second's delay, watching Dee's face for a while before she smiled at him.
"I've lost my touch. Back in the old days, I used to catch everyone off guard when I shot back an answer real quick like that. Whereas now they all take me for some sleepy old dotard who don't know which way is up no more."
"I came out here to ask you about something. They call me Dee."
A name like that seems to say you come from somewhere else, and you'll be moving on soon. Of course, before you turn to leave, I reckon a lot of folks will be dying or crying. Step inside."
Slowly getting up out of her seat, the old woman opened the door before her. The interior was well kept. Motes of dust dancing up in the morning light glittered like flecks of gold.
"Have a seat over there,"
the old woman said, indicating a chair as she headed for the kitchen.
"I'll fix us some tea."
"Thank you." The old woman disappeared, letting the door bang shut on its own, but soon enough she returned with a pair of steaming cups on a tray.
"I got this from a merchant from the capital 50 years ago. You know, I'd never use it for any of the folks from town. It's just for special visitors from far away."
"How do you know I've come far?" Dee asked, looking not at the cup her light brown and thoroughly creased hand had set in front of him, but at a face that seemed wrought entirely with wrinkles.
"You figure any man of the look you've got in your eye could stay put in just one village?"
Pounding the small of her back a few times, the old woman settled into a chair.
"You see, human beings pull around a whole heap of chains that the eye can't see. The other end of 'em is set in the earth, so folks can walk a mile or two, but they just can't go no further than that. Sometimes the chains are named home or belongings, and sometimes we call 'em sweetheart or memories. When we're young, we try to pull 'em out of the ground, but 10 or 20 years go by and those chains just get thicker, and you've got more of 'em than ever. And when that happens, all you can do is set yourself down wherever seems proper. Once you do that, those chains start looking like solid gold to the human eye. What most people don't know is that it's just a thin layer of gold plating. See, the good Lord made it so humans can't see him for what they really are. You follow what I'm saying? What it comes down to is people who aren't like that, whose eyes aren't clouded and don't have a single chain on them, they must be made by someone other than God. Now I wonder who that could be.
And with that she cast an all-knowing gaze directly at Dee and set her cup down on the table.
I'm sure you're in a hurry, so I thank you for indulging me in a cup of tea and listening to the ramblings of a foolish old woman. You'd probably cut anyone else's head off for saying what I did, so I reckon I have bragging rights there.
Actually, I'd like to hear about the days when humans and nobility coexisted, Dee said when he finally opened his mouth. Anything at all, if you'd be so kind as to tell me about that time. The old woman squinted a bit and folded her hands on top of the table. After sitting like that for several seconds without moving, she said,
There's too much to tell. So much that it'd be the same as me not telling you a blessed thing. But the lot of 'em went somewhere far away back when I was just a wee toddler. No one knows whatever became of 'em all. And after that, there was only one time they ever came back. And that was 30 years ago. If something's going on here now, I suppose that's the cause. Looks like when you come right down to it, nobles can't change what they are.
a girl was bitten. Dee said, she sleeps even now, never aging. And as she sleeps, she makes other people dream about me. The old woman picked up her cup. When she tipped it to her mouth, the steam seemed to billow from her lips. Pulling the cup the tiniest bit away, she said,
30 years ago, that girl was found lying in the woods just north of the village. There was a pair of bite marks on her neck. Truth be known, they were supposed to banish her on the spot, but they didn't. It's still anybody's guess which course of action would have been better. And she'd never met you before, is that right?
Dee nodded. Gazing steadily at the hunter's face, the old woman continued,
As good as you look, I suppose she'd want to see you even if she couldn't. But, you know.
And then the old woman caught herself. Dee didn't say a word.
If it was me,
She continued,
and I'd met you a million times, and I still wouldn't want to dream about you because in the end, I'd wind up crying. No two ways about it. I doubt you can find a woman on the frontier who's not used to shedding tears, but it doesn't get any easier. It still hurts just as much every time we do it.
And yet, Sybil dreamt of him, a man she'd never met. What kind of man was the noble who bit Sybil? This time, Dee's question brought results.
There was someone who actually spotted him. Sybil's grandmother. She passed away 20 years ago, but she used to tell people every single day how she'd seen him while she was searching for Sybil. Why, she made me listen to it so much I practically needed me a set of earplugs. Yes, he was a giant of a man dressed in black.
And there the old woman stopped. Her eyes held a mysterious spark, and the spark became twin beams of light that could have bored a hole through Dee's face.
As for his features, he looked too good to be of this world. Like you know.
Dee brought the cup to his mouth. His eyes seemed to be gazing at old Mrs. Shelton, watching something else, and not focused on anything at all at the same time.
Why did he have to bite Sybil?
The old woman asked, the light in her eyes growing more intense, flickering with a touch of madness.
Why did he have to go and make her dream? And what kind of dreams did he give her anyway?
Of course, there were no answers, so Dee answered with another question. Because, after all, that was the whole reason he'd come. Who was closest to the girl?
Let me see. Eiling.
Where is she?
Her home's a farmhouse a little over a mile southwest of here. I wager she'll be around at this hour.
Dee stood up, prepared to leave.
Wait,
the old woman said, and the hunter stopped.
Have another cup of tea, won't you? I don't want to let my first chance at conversation in a long time run off so easily. For all I know, maybe another 10 years before I get a chance to chat with anyone again. The children don't even come out here to catch the sticky bugs anymore. This may be a peaceful village, but I'm lonely.
Dee reluctantly took his seat again.
Not only are you handsome, but you listen to people too. Someday, I'm sure you'll settle down somewhere. Find yourself a good wife.
And leaving him with those words, the old woman went into the kitchen. A peaceful village, isn't it? Dee muttered.
That it is.
A hoarse voice responded from his left hand as it rested on his knee. Is it a good village?
That I can't tell.
We're in the same boat then, Dee said.
Just because it's peaceful doesn't mean I'd call it good. The same can be said for villages that aren't so peaceful. There's nothing good in this world. Not in nobles, or in humans. Or in you, for that matter.
Dee turned his face to look out the window. The plains changed from minute to minute. Each and every verdant leaf was charged with the vitality of morning, declaring that there was still more of the blazing season of fall to come. In contrast to the white light that surrounded him, Dee alone was a wintry shadow. Accompanied by a faint aroma, the old woman returned.
Here you go,
she said, setting down his cup. In the middle of the cup with thin, amber fluid floated a single blue petal. The petal was like a tiny blue sea. Dee brought the drink to his mouth with his left hand. Needless to say, he kept his right hand free to be ready for any sudden attacks. Though his left hand stopped, it didn't seem like an interruption to his fluid movements.
What is it?
The old woman asked, smiling happily. Drink some, Dee said.
Huh?
Taste yours. It smells different.
Oh, that. You know, I went and changed the tea leaves. This is homemade, grown in my very own garden out back. The last pot was some cheap stuff I got off a merchant from the capital.
Winking at her guest, she drew the steaming liquid through her wrinkled lips.
There. Are you satisfied there's no poison in it now? My suspicious hunter? You've gone and spoiled the mood. It's okay. You don't have to drink it if you don't want to.
Dee brought the cup to his mouth. The old woman watched with pleasure as his Adam's apple bobbed up and down. Setting the cup down, Dee got to his feet. He was headed for the door, but halfway there he turned around and asked, Did you dream about me too? The old woman nodded. And what did you think? The brief silence that followed may have been her wrestling with concerns about what it would be polite to say.
I can't speak for the rest of them,
Mrs. Sheldon finally ventured.
but I thought you were dangerous.
Dangerous?
In the dream, you seemed to say you were a dangerous man as you walked along, even though you didn't actually come right out and say it. I could definitely tell.
That was probably the best way to describe him. Thanks for the tea, Dee said simply, and with that he left her home.
Godspeed to you.
The old woman called from the porch.
We'll meet again soon. Next time, you'll have to listen to one of the songs I wrote. It's a good one, since I made it back when I was young.
Saying nothing, Dee mounted his horse, gave a single kick of his heels to its sides, and was off. When the house was hidden behind the hill, a hoarse voice snapped.
I can't believe how stupid you can be sometimes. Drinking that tea of all things. It was probably poison.
You mean to say you don't know what was in it?
Well, I could make the tea well enough, but there was some other unknown substance in it.
You'll have to do better than that, Dee said as if the matter didn't involve him at all. A dangerous man, am I? He muttered.
That's for sure, as far as anybody's concerned. But remember what the old lady said. She said the whole village felt the same thing.
What they felt was that he was clearly a dangerous man. Dangerous for them, that is. The voice continued.
That would mean the folks in the village called you here even though they think you're a threat to them. It's possible they called you here to kill you. If that's the case, what that farmer did would stand to reason. But I don't think that's it. Despite what the old lady said, I'm not so sure every last person in town felt the same way. It's pretty clear they weren't hostile. After all, this is a peaceful village.
A peaceful village, is it? As he rode, the words he muttered sailed off on the wind and the scenery streamed by either side. To any bystander, this conversation would have been unparalleled in its weirdness.
You were gonna leave town,
the hoarse voice continued indifferently.
On your way out, you were attacked, but your attacker was killed with an arrow from your dreams. He must have wanted to keep you alive. And as a result, you wound up staying here. It may very well be the farmer who attacked you was part of his plan, you know.
Then suddenly, the hoarse voice was gone. Without a single word, Dee kept gazing straight ahead. The young man didn't seem to be concerned about the uncanny ring of this voice, that seemed to come from nowhere. Nor did he seem the least bit worried about the subject of its discourse. Perhaps the weirdness that existed beyond the mortal realm was something the inhuman never even noticed. Page break indicated by a small cross. Back at the house, old Mrs. Sheldon watched her departing guest until both he and his mount had vanished behind the hill. Then, in a manner that was totally unbecoming for her age, she seductively winked in their direction, before stepping off the porch and heading around to her backyard. Mrs. Sheldon's yard was a fenced-off plot of over 1,000 square feet, where colors beyond numbering competed in a floral arena. Stopping at a certain patch of pretty flowers with the same blue petals that were floating in the tea, the old woman said to herself,
Oh, he's a dangerous man, all right. But I wouldn't mind getting into danger with him. In some ways, I want that tea to work. But in other ways, I suppose I don't. Lordy me, it's been a long time since I felt like a mixed-up schoolgirl.
And then, casually glancing down at the blue flowers at her feet, she said,
"Well, this is certainly where the tea was picked. But I wonder how long it's been growing here. I've never seen it before."
and just as the old woman bent over to pick a bit more of it, she heard the strident sound of something whistling through the air right by her ear. Chapter 2, End.